Just earlier today, Mr. Jack Smith leapfrogged the typical judicial process, and he directly asked the U.S. Supreme Court to get involved and to rule on whether or not President Trump can be prosecuted. Although, to explain the significance of what's actually happening here, I need to back up and give you a bit of the backstory. This right here, as you're likely well aware, is Mr. Jack Smith. He is the federal prosecutor who is currently pushing forward the case against President Trump over in Washington, D.C. That's the case that's charging President Trump with plotting to overturn the results of the 2020 election. And while the trial itself is set to start on March 4th, well, right now there are a lot of behind-the-scenes machinations playing themselves out on both sides, on both the prosecution and defense side. For their part, President Trump's legal team has been making the argument that, as President of the United States, Trump is actually immune from these types of lawsuits altogether. Their logic is that President Trump's actions on and before January 6th are all covered under the presidential immunity doctrine, which states that presidents are free to carry out their duties without threat of civil lawsuits. According to a Supreme Court decision from the year 1982, quote, "The immunity protects presidents from civil lawsuits over official acts, or acts taken with the outer perimeter of his official responsibilities." And so Trump's basic argument here is that while serving as the President of the United States, questioning the results of a federal election that he himself believed to be unfair was well within the perimeter of his official responsibilities. However, the federal judge overseeing this January 6th case, well, she did not agree. Specifically, Judge Tanya, who was appointed to the bench by Barack Obama, she issued a ruling about a week and a half ago wherein she dismissed these arguments of Trump's lawyers. Here was part of what she wrote in her official ruling, quote, "The office of the president does not confer a lifelong get-out-of-jail-free pass. Former presidents enjoy no special conditions on their federal criminal liability. The defendant may be subject to federal investigation, indictment, prosecution, conviction, and punishment for any criminal acts undertaken while in office." And as such, she dismissed the presidential immunity argument, and she allowed the case to proceed forward. However, as soon as she made that ruling, Trump's legal team, they came back and they immediately signaled that they will be filing an appeal with the appellate court and working to overturn her decision. Now, this type of procedural back and forth is not really uncommon before trial, very, very typical. It's typical for both the defense and the prosecution to try and eke out any small amount of edge that they possibly can. However, there's something else going on here, which is the fact that by going through the appeals process, this case might get delayed, and the start of the actual trial might get pushed back a little bit. And that is something that Jack Smith does not want to see happen. Because you see, Jack Smith and his team of prosecutors, they're pushing to have this trial begin on Monday, March 4th, which is exactly one day before Super Tuesday. And in case you're not aware, Super Tuesday next year falls on March 5th. That's where 17 different states will hold their primary election. And for some odd reason, Jack Smith is adamant that Trump's criminal trial must begin on the day right before Super Tuesday. And so, in order to make sure that the courts stick to a schedule, Jack Smith took a rather surprising step. Earlier today, he filed an appeal directly to the U.S. Supreme Court, asking them to quickly take up the case and decide whether President Trump can stand trial. Quote, "Special counsel Jack Smith on Monday asked the Supreme Court to take up and rule quickly on whether former President Donald Trump can be prosecuted. Smith is attempting to bypass the appeals court. The request filed on Monday for the Supreme Court to take up the matter directly reflects Smith's desire to keep the trial, currently set for March 4th, on track and to prevent any delays that could push back the case until after next year's presidential election." Meaning that in order to make sure that this criminal trial starts right in the middle of the primary election cycle, Jack Smith leapfrogged the typical judicial process, bypassed the appeals court, and submitted a request directly to the U.S. Supreme Court. Here's part of what he wrote in his request. Quote, "This case presents a fundamental question at the heart of our democracy, whether a former president is absolutely immune from federal prosecution for crimes committed while in office, or is constitutionally protected from federal prosecution when he has been impeached but not convicted before the criminal proceedings begin. It is of imperative public importance that respondents' claims of immunity be resolved by this court and that respondents' trial proceed as promptly as possible if this claim of immunity is rejected." Jack Smith and his team then made a special point to mention that if the court did not expedite this matter, then they would not have an opportunity to consider this particular question in the current term, and then they finished the request by writing this, quote, "The United States recognizes that this is an extraordinary request. this is an extraordinary case. The court should grant certiorari and set a briefing schedule that would permit this case to be argued and resolved as promptly as possible. Now, based on the current schedule of the U.S. Supreme Court, the earliest that they would actually consider this appeal would be January 5th of next year, which is when the next private conference among the justices is scheduled for, meaning that the earliest that they can respond about whether they'll even take up the case or not will be in about 3.5 weeks. However, even if they decide to take up the case, it's not like a decision will come instantaneously. A typical case before the U.S. Supreme Court, it lasts several months from the time when the court agrees to take up the case up until a final decision is actually reached. And so they would have to take up the case and then decide on it pretty quickly if Jack Smith is to have any hope of keeping the March 4th deadline. And so that's all to say that for Jack Smith and his team of prosecutors, having the U.S. Supreme Court accept their case right now and decide on it quickly, well, it's of utmost importance because it's their best shot to make sure that this criminal trial starts exactly one single day before the Super Tuesday primary elections. If you'd like to go deeper into this particular case and read the full 81-page request that Jack Smith submitted to the U.S. Supreme Court, I'll throw the PDF version of it down into the description box below this video if you're the type of person that likes to dig into the weeds. And all I ask in return is that as you're making your way down there to the description box, take a super quick detour to smash those like and subscribe buttons. That like button will ensure that this video reaches ever more people via the YouTube algorithm, while smashing that subscribe button will ensure that every time we publish a new piece of content, it'll hit your newsfeed, well, every time we publish it. And now, let me quickly introduce today's sponsor by showing you this little piece of money. Or rather, I should say that this is fake money being printed into oblivion by those geniuses over in Washington, D.C. And so before they completely obliterate your life savings, what I recommend you do is to convert that fake money into real money, which is physical gold and silver. And the best company to use is the sponsor of today's episode, American Hartford Gold, who also happens to be my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. They have thousands of other 5-star ratings across the country. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They ship quickly, directly to your doorstep. Their product listings are awesome. They're stacked with great options of gold and silver bullion and coins, and they have amazing customer service. When you pick up the phone and call them, you feel good knowing you support a company that supports the truth getting out into the wider American audience. And so calling them up is a no-brainer. But best of all, if you tell them that Roman sent you, they will throw in up to $5,000 worth of free silver with your first purchase. It's 866-242-2352, or you can simply text the word Roman, R-O-M-A-N, Roman, to 65532. Of course, all their details will be down in the description box below. And now, let's head on back to the studio. And now lastly, if you are enjoying this content, but you're thinking to yourself, man, I just wish Roman would publish more episodes of Facts Matter every single week. Well, you're in luck, because I do. Over on Epoch TV, our awesome no censorship video platform, I publish anywhere between 1 to 3 exclusive episodes of Facts Matter every single week, usually pertaining to topics that are, quite frankly, too spicy for here on YouTube. And so, if you'd like access to all those extra episodes every single week, including a huge backlog from the last 3 years, well, you can find it all over on Epoch TV. And right now is a great opportunity to try it because the Epoch Times has recently announced a new holiday sale. You can try a 6-month subscription to the Epoch Times for just a single $1. This is really the absolute best sale of the year. Pretty much, we obviously don't make any money on this subscription. Pretty much, the idea is just to get you in the door, have you try out the content, fall in love with it, and then maybe you'll be a subscriber for a long, long time to come. You can, of course, cancel any time, but something tells us that you won't. Something tells us that you love my show on there, you love the other shows on there, you love all the analysis articles, the infographics, basically everything that we publish, and you wind up being a subscriber for a long, long, long time to come. The link to the sale page will be right there at the top of the description box below. You can click on that link. It'll take you to the sale page where you can try the Epoch Times for 6 full months for just a single $1. Hope you click on that link, and I hope that you join us over on the Epoch Times website. And then until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed. Most importantly, stay free.